Hey, we're a two-man show. What about Michael Reagan and having to follow KT McFarland, who also worked for his father? Big round of applause. Come on, stand up. It's like a Catholic mass. I want you to get a little exercise.
Yeah, before we start, KT, to follow on with what you were saying about my father, is that, and I write about this in my new book, about my father, lesson my father taught me. I learned every military song riding out to my father's ranch from the time I was 8 years old until I was now driving myself out to my father's ranch. He would sing every anthem and talk about the greatness of America. It didn't happen when he decided to run for governor, run for president. He was always well, what Maureen and I say, he was the Boy Scout going for his Eagle badge. And he would sing, he loved America. And I don't know if you know this story, but he was legally blind. He was one of the first ones to wear contact lenses. And he used to, imagine this, we'd ride out to the ranch, he used to get dirt in them, he'd take them and put them in his mouth and suck on them as we're going out to the ranch. Think about that today. And then he tried to put it in the rearview mirror as we're driving out to the ranch. And so you gotta understand, he wanted to be in the military so bad when he was an actor, because a lot of actors are getting into it. But because he was legally blind, he knew he couldn't get in. He couldn't pass the eye exam. So my father, it's the only time he lied in his life about anything. My father went out and memorized all of the eye charts. And he knew every eye chart that could have been put up in front of him when he would go to join the military. And he ultimately got in because they would say, read line 3, D, F, E, B, 2, you're in. And that's how he got into the Army in the first place. And then he raised himself to the rank of captain. They offered him the rank of major if he would stay in and not retire, but he said this, he said, there's somebody fighting this war overseas. And he said, I can't go overseas to fight the war because of my eyesight, and you'd be afraid of me going over there because I may shoot the wrong guy. So he said, I'd rather have that major position given to someone else who in fact can go overseas to fight in the Second World War. He never found out who got that major rank, but it worked out pretty well for him because later on he became commander-in-chief. But I wanted to share that with you, KT.
And by the way, I'll add this, and if you ever get the chance to go to Normandy and you do go to the facilities there in Saint-Mary-Glisse, there's a wonderful video you can watch, and it's of Michael's father narrating some of the training films for the Army. He served his nation in any way he could.
300.
And that is an amazing story.
300 training films. And I don't know how many know this, but he was the first sitting president to visit Normandy on D-Day. No one else as president had ever done that. And they will never forget it.
Nor should they. It's a great trip. I recommend it for everyone. Michael and I have done a little two-man show over the years on radio and in person, and we thought we'd think it through and write up some questions. We're going to give you a chance. We've got some of your questions up here, randomly selected, so if you left, you may not hear your question being asked of Michael. But I wanted to start tonight by first reminding all of you of why we're here. We're here because we're in a time when America is in a cultural pivot, a political pivot, and a new 21st century dynamic. And here at CPAC, as I see all of you, the activists, come out, I hear so many people echoing things that I learned as a child watching Michael's father stand up there and stand for this country. And I think it's a really good time to put these, not only KT McFarland, a Reagan, I guess we'll call her a Reaganite, but also to have Michael here as the first time that a Reagan will address the Reagan dinner at CPAC. So how about that?
What a concept. I don't know who came up with that.
I don't know. You called me, Michael. I don't know how this started. You know, the book Lessons My Father Taught Me is where I want to start tonight. And then we'll get into lessons we really need to learn today. Your foundation is about advancing the causes that were dear to your father. And of course, you keep that legacy alive with the Reagan Legacy Foundation. But those lessons are more than words in a book. They're more than chapters, and I recommend it for everyone. There's even an audio book. But let's talk about the 2016 presidential cycle. It has happened time and time again. Candidates claim the mantle of Reagan. They met Reagan, they shook his hand, they knew him somehow, they may have worked for him. In the 2016 presidential election cycle, many candidates did this. Were there any of them who ran for president that reminded you of your father?
You know, I will go back to 1980. We weren't looking for Abraham Lincoln. We weren't looking for Thomas Jefferson. We weren't looking for George Washington. We were looking for a leader. And I think that's really what people are looking for. In my opinion, nobody's going to stand up to Ronald Reagan. And I think in some ways it does a disservice to people to always try and qualify it and put them up against my father, because they'll pale in comparison. And I think when they do this with Donald Trump, it takes away from what Donald Trump may, in fact, accomplish as President of the United States. It'd be nice at some point to have a Donald Trump dinner, not a Donald Trump friend of Ronald Reagan dinner. We had our time in the sun. My dad showed us the pathway, and we know the pathway. But to sit there and say, does this person carry the Reagan name? Is this person more Reagan-esque? I don't look at them that way. I look at them who they are, what they are, where they want to take America, and do it that way. I'm honored by it, but I don't think we do any service for ourselves trying to pit tomorrow's candidates against my father of the 1980s.
You know, your father carried the mantle of being an outsider to some degree, although he'd been in politics. He was also attacked by many in the media. He was the dumb actor from California. Who was this goofball running for president? There were many other names used. I won't use a lot of them or any of them on this stage. And those attacks were thrown at Donald Trump. Did you see any similarities between the two men?
Oh yeah, absolutely similarities. The difference is today we have social media, we have talk radio, we have cable news. Back then we had ABC, NBC, CBS, LA Times, New York Times, which is always there. And they were attacking him relentlessly on a regular basis. But my father didn't feel that he needed to answer every time someone attacked him. He felt he had better things to, in fact, do other than spend half the day attacking those who were attacking him. And I think that was a very, very important thing. And I think that's a lesson. In fact, my op-ed piece that just came out today talks about that as if I wrote a letter to Donald Trump. I understand what you're going through, but again, you have a lot of important things you need to be doing. We all know about the news. This is not a news story to tell us the news isn't on our team. It may be good to make us feel good somebody's talking about it, but we've been talking about that since the beginning of time. There's important things. There's tax cuts. There's Obamacare. There's the military. There's so many important things to do that my father didn't feel in his time he needed to be answering that. I'll give you an example. My father, back in 1980, those around 1980, they were attacking him. The left was attacking him just unbelievably. He was going to start World War III. He was going to turn Iran into a parking lot. He was going to turn it into a glass factory if he was elected. You will never find an op-ed, a statement by my father, ever denying that he would do that. He allowed the left to sell the Iranians on what he might in fact do. And he knew if he didn't deny it, let them go ahead and sell it. And then, of course, on the day my dad's sworn in, who goes free? All the hostages become free and come back to Germany and ultimately the United States of America. Had he answered his detractors and said, oh no, I would never do that, that may never have happened. And so my dad really understood that. Let the left disintegrate itself. You don't need to help it. It's already going there.
What would you say to Donald Trump? Give him a little media advice today.
Sometimes, my mother said, you'll never learn anything with your mouth open.
Or your fingers on Twitter.
Or your fingers on Twitter and what have you. But, he tweets like a madman. But my dad also understood his audience. And Trump understands his audience. My father, in 1980, when he decided to run, after Nancy told him he could run, because he had to get permission from Nancy, of course. But we got a call. My wife, Colleen, who's here tonight, we just celebrated our 41st wedding anniversary. And, we got a call from Nancy, come up to the house. Your dad has an announcement. And we went up there, and Dad came to us. It's really kind of interesting, because I think it plays into Donald Trump and his audience, too. And my dad told us he had just gotten back from speaking in Georgia. And he said, everywhere I go, when I walk into a hotel, the bellman says, Governor, you've got to run again. You've just got to run. When I get to my room, there's a note on the pillow next to the chocolate from the chambermaid saying, Governor, please run again. America needs you. And he said, because of that, and it happens all over the country, I've decided to run again for the presidency of the United States. Well, my sister Maureen, God bless her, those of you who didn't know her, she was so wonderful, a wonderful woman, passed away from melanoma in 2001, and God bless her. But my sister Maureen and Colleen and I went out for a glass of wine afterwards. And as we're sitting there, and Maureen raises her glass, she says, we need to toast Dad. And here's the toast. If he doesn't make it this time, we're going to run him for president of the bellhop and chambermaids labor union. And it's absolutely true. And Donald Trump's the same way. He knew who his audience was. And he was able to get into that audience and bring them out. My dad, chambermaids, bellhops, what have you. And you look at Donald Trump, same arena, the same thing. You've got to know your audience, no matter who you are, whenever you're out speaking, you got to know who your audience is and know who's listening. So when Donald Trump speaks, you got to know that Putin's listening, all the other areas of the world are listening. When you say something against Sweden, right or wrong, you got to know the Swedish head guy's listening, and he's going to return serve. You don't need to get yourself in those situations. Sometimes you can be right, but you need to just be quiet about it. The world will find out about it.
And on Twitter, in 140 characters, in 10 seconds, they'll know about it before you can edit it.
In a minute and a half. When my dad, again, back to knowing your audience, my dad gave the talk, the Evil Empire speech at the evangelical gathering in 1983, I think it was. Who was the audience? The ones in front of him? No, the audience he was speaking to was the Nathan Sharansky's of the world, a half a world away in gulags, who were looking for that leader also to make sure they were free. And my dad didn't even know that. He heard the speech until my dad was president, and Nathan Sharansky made an appointment to come see my dad at the White House. And he walked in the Oval Office, and he told my dad how they tapped out the speech in code to everybody that was held in those gulags. And cheers went up for the gulags. My dad walks out the door of the Oval Office into the anteroom, and he invites everybody working for him into the Oval Office to meet Nathan Sharansky. And you know what he said? He heard the speech. He heard the speech. He heard the speech. He was so excited that Nathan Sharansky heard the speech. Or when my dad spoke at the Brandenburg Gate, the audience in front of him, they were all free. Audience he was talking to was behind the Brandenburg Gate, not free, looking for that leader who was in fact going to set them free.
One of the reasons he was known as the great communicator.
I call Trump the great Twitticator. But it's knowing your audience, and my father really, really did know his audience.
All right, you mentioned Putin, so I want to put Russia to bed, for what that's worth.
Scary.
Yeah. Your father, Russia, well, then the Soviet Union and the Democrats. Let's lay it out here at CPAC. What really happened then, given all the recent allegations?
Two stories. Obama had this, and his administration had this way about them. We're going to tell Russia everything we're going to do, and then, of course, not do it. But we're going to tell Russia everything we're going to do, and then when they go to do it, nobody's in the room, and nothing can happen. In 1981, my father became aware that the Russians, in 1979, were stealing information from the United States dealing with their natural gas pipeline. And they wanted to build their natural gas pipeline to be as good as ours. And they were stealing the information. My dad got the information, went to the CIA and said, what can we do? And so the CIA came up with a program with a logic bomb included in the program. And they put it in a spot where they knew Russia would in fact steal it. And so Russia stole their logic bomb. Well, the logic bomb was set to be put into their natural gas program, and it would spin 10 million times because they wanted the Russians to really believe, boy, we got the program here. But on 10,000,001, the logic bomb tells their natural gas pipeline to do a pressure test. Not knowing, we didn't know that, in fact, their natural gas pipeline was not capable of a high pressure test. You can go online and see the explosion of the natural gas pipeline that Russia had in 1981. You could see it from space. It was so large. So Ronald Reagan made a significant move on Russia early on in his administration. And it's interesting also, people talk about how the Russians were involved in this last election. That somehow that's the reason that Trump won. 1979. Ted Kennedy goes to Senator John Tunney of California and asks Senator John Tunney, would you please visit with the KGB? And would you let the KGB let the Soviets know that I'm willing to take the side of the Soviets on going into Afghanistan, where the president, Jimmy Carter, is unwilling to do that. And if I take that stand, would you do something embarrassing for Jimmy Carter that would cause me to get the nomination of the party for the 1980 election? They didn't do anything. But Carter learned from that, and in 1980, running against my father, he went to Armand Hammer, the industrialist, and asked Armand Hammer to visit with the Russian ambassador in the United States, Dobrynin. And would you tell Dobrynin to tell the Soviets, if they'll let some of the refuseniks go, it would help Carter with the Jewish vote in the United States in the 1980 election, and that might help turn the tables to beat Ronald Reagan. 1984, Jimmy Carter, the Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, Ted Kennedy, all go to Dobrynin again to ask them one more time, do something embarrassing, so embarrassing for Reagan that in fact Mondale will win the election in '84. And I wrote an op-ed piece on this, and it's really interesting. You probably never saw it because the media never reported. You thought it might make news because I made the point. I said, it's interesting, while they're talking about the Russians, in fact, getting all this information and what have you, stealing this information and helping Donald Trump to become president, back in 1980, the Democrats were knocking on the door of the Soviets during the Cold War, trying to enlist their help to defeat my father in 1980, and Kennedy was enlisting their help to defeat a sitting Democratic president in 1980, but the media will not cover that story because that's not their agenda. It's not that they're always fake media. They're no media. They don't report the stories they don't want to report. They don't want to give you the information that you should have to make an honest decision. And that's why you see the Fox Newses and you see talk radio and you see things of that nature flourish during this period of time.
Now you have the history, and you can now realize that it's been the Democrats working with the Russians all along.
They're working. Yeah.
But the facts are out there for them to read.
The Russians didn't like working with the Democrats either. Yeah, go ahead.
Apparently nobody liked working with the Democrats. The Russians wouldn't help them win the election. And it worked out well for us. All right, we talked about the logic bomb. We talked about the gas pipeline. Cyber warfare by Ronald Reagan. How about that? We need to have that same approach today. Apparently, he knew how to make it work way back before there were apps and iPhones. You, by the way, have also been threatened for some of the things that have happened in your father's time. Muammar Gaddafi didn't like you much, did he?
No, actually, people remember the flyby my father did in Libya back in the 80s. Took out 2 of the homes Muammar Gaddafi owned, and Muammar Gaddafi came out the next day. Colleen remembers this to this day. Muammar Gaddafi came out and said, you know, you killed my adopted daughter. And I understand Ronald Reagan has an adopted child. Maybe I need to kill him. So Secret Service got real close for a period of time. And so, but we found out a couple years ago during that whole thing with Gaddafi in Libya that his daughter's living a great life in France with a lot of money at the time. But so he threatened my life back there. But another story about that is, Katie, you may love this one too. We're having dinner, and Mike, you'll like it too. We're having dinner with my wife, and we're having dinner with my dad and Nancy, Century City, back in '83, I think it was. And get done with dinner, we're having coffee, excuse me, and the phone rings, and it's Ed Meese. Ed Meese is 3 floors down. Chief of Staff to my father. He said, Mr. President, you know we're doing war games in the Gulf of Sidra. My dad says, yes, Ed, I know that. I'm the one who approved it. And Ed says, yes, Mr. President. This is why I have the Admiral on the phone. And just to let you know that there's Gaddafi sending planes out from Libya, and they're feigning as if they're going to shoot one of our boys down. And the fear is that they may. And so the Admiral wants to know if our boys are shot at, what should we do? And my dad said, shoot back. and Ed, we're listening. That was a long conversation. And then Ed says, yes, Mr. President. I'm gathering in what he was saying because I'm hearing the answers. So Ed says, yes, Mr. President. Well, the Admiral wants to know, if they shoot our boys and they turn and run, what should we do then? Chase them. All right. And then Ed says to...
There's a man of few words.
Yes, right. And then Ed asked my dad again, he says, Mr. President, the Admiral wants to know, if they shoot at our boys and they turn and run back into their own airspace, what should we do then? My dad said, you can see, just come on. My dad says, Ed, you tell the Admiral, if our boys are shot at, you chase them all the way back to their hangars if you have to, but you will shoot them down. And Ed says, if that should happen, Mr. President, should I call and wake you? And my dad says, no, Ed, only call and wake me if our boys are shot down. Well, those of you who were alive back then, if you go back and roll tape, Kay remembers, next morning there's 2 Russian MiGs in the ground in Libya, and the media all day long is trying to find out why Ed Meese didn't call the President of the United States of America. And finally Sam Donaldson got a hold of my dad, and my dad said, because I told him only if our boys are shot down, and our boys weren't shot down. And one more caveat. When that conversation was over, Colleen and I said goodnight to Dad and Nancy, and we left. Dad and Nancy retired to their room for the night. My dad did not pick up the phone and call the United Nations to get permission to be President of the United States.
You know, there's a guy in the room, I don't know if Kirk Lippold's here, commander of the USS Cole, but wouldn't you have loved to have had those marching orders?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, the USS Ronald Reagan right now is sitting in Tokyo, Japan. She is the head of the spear, most lethal weapon we have in the United States, that and the Bush. So she's over there keeping an eye on Tokyo, not Tokyo, but keeping an eye on North Korea and a lot of other people in that area. So I feel pretty good with the USS Ronald Reagan sitting in Tokyo right now.
All right, Michael Reagan has given us some inside peek at his father, the book Lessons My Father Taught Me. Let's go back to that for a moment.
Okay.
There are a couple things. I mean, you've got a lot of great pictures in the book, you tell a lot of stories, but they're more than anecdotes. I want you to share something personal between you and your dad.
Something personal about me and my father. A lot of people always ask me, what was your favorite time with your father? To be honest with you, before he got into politics. Democrats and Republicans are a lot the same. They always tell you they're doing it for the children, but the day you say you're going to run for office, they take you away from your children because you spent most of your time out campaigning. So those times you get to be together. So all those times I had with my father, 20 years of going out to the ranch, bought him his first chainsaw, were so important. But probably one of there's a lot of them, but if I could take you to, I guess, two quick stories. He's shot March 30th, 1981. Colleen and I had, in fact, been honored. We were the ones who, that was the first, the Hilton there here in D.C.
The Hinckley Hilton, as it became to be called.
The Hilton was was where he had his first inaugural ball, and Colleen and I were honored to be the ones who had him there. You'll love this. He walks into the green room. They're never green, by the way. He walked into the green room, and all ready to be introduced for the first time as President of the United States. He walks in, and Nancy is in front of me. Colleen is here on my left. Dad, instead of coming here, goes to a mirror on the back wall and fixing his tie, getting all ready. And Nancy's talking to me, but I'm not really listening. I'm looking past her into the mirror, back at my father's eyes. And my father's fixing his tie and jacket and getting all excited. And all of a sudden he cocks his head and gets a little twinkle in his eye. If you ever spend time with my dad, you see that a lot when something unbelievable is going to go on. He cocks his head, gets a twinkle in his eye, and he jumps straight up in the air, clicks his heels together and said, "I'm the President of the United States." And Nancy was just like Nancy. "Ronnie," I said, "Well, don't hurt yourself before you go out there, please." I mean, that was just a really, really wonderful moment. Or when he was shot on March 30th, and we were made to stay in our house because they didn't want us to fly back to Washington too quick for fear the markets would crash, the world would come to an end. And we're in the house all day, and in captivity. And they finally sent a plane for us from D.C., pick us up, take us back to D.C. We get in very early in the morning in the White House. And we would see my father at 10 o'clock the next morning at GW. You understand, this is like 6 hours after he's off the table. We all know about my father's humor. How that day he looked at the doctors and said, "I hope you're all Republicans. Honey, I forgot to duck," and what have you. But what does he say to his son and his family as walk in the next morning? And, I looked at Dad and I said, "Good morning, Dad. Good morning, Michael." I said, "How you doing?" He says, "Well, yesterday I was shot." And I said, "Dad, the world knows you were shot yesterday." "Well, if you're ever going to get shot, don't be wearing a new suit." And I said, "Why are you telling me this?" "Well, yesterday, when I was shot." "Yes, Dad." "I was wearing a brand new suit. I just picked it up the day before, and I was wearing it, and I'm the president. You'd think they let me undress. Well, no. They put me on this gurney, and they cut that suit off of me, and the last time I saw it, it was in shreds in the hospital room, and that's why I'm telling you, if you're ever going to get shot, don't be wearing a new suit."
And a pretty good impression, isn't it?
And I said, "Well, Dad, I'll tell Colleen." I said, "I'll get the brown suit ready if that's ever going to happen." He said, "Well, that young man who shot me." I said, "John Hinckley." "Yes, Hinckley." I said, "Yes, what?" "Well, understand his parents in the oil business." "Yeah?" "Well, I understand they live in Denver." "Yes, they do. They're in the oil business in Denver, of course." "Well, do you think they have any money?" And I'm thinking to myself, what in the hell are we doing with this one? And I said, "Well, Dad, he's in the oil business, lives in Denver. Of course he has money." "Well, do you think he'd ever buy me a new suit?" That's all he ever wanted. Just get me a new damn suit. And they never got him a new suit. But if you go to my dad's library in Simi Valley, they now have that suit on display at the library.
Well, you know, I think you just answered the question from Kendra in Alexandria, Virginia, who wanted to know something about your father that nobody knows, and now we know. Wear a brown suit or an old suit.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. All right,
Yeah.
I'm never wearing a new suit again. All right, we're going to take some of your questions. We selected them at random, which means we didn't select them. We just picked them out. In no particular order, I'm going to throw them at Michael. Take it away. What advice would you give to Donald Trump regarding foreign relations with Russia? And that is from Dale Bellis. Dale, stand up. Where are you? Still here? All right, there you go, Dale.
No, you know,
You
it's
have
very
been
simple.
heard.
Yeah, it's very simple. You have to go with the trust but verify with the Soviet Union. If he's going to quote my father, "Make America Great Again, peace through strength," then you need to quote that one also. You know, trust but verify with the Russians, because you have a KGB man running the Soviet Union. That's who you have, and he's never going to tell you the truth. He's never going to be honest, and what have you. You know, it's interesting, and if I could sit down with, I'd love to sit down with Donald Trump for a day. And if you go back to, because we talked a couple of times about my father and what he said in the last talk he gave from the Oval Office saying goodbye. One of the things they didn't mention tonight, one of the things in that talk was this, and one of the things he was proudest of, that during his 8 years as President of the United States, the Soviet Union did not take over 1 square inch of land anywhere in the world. And that certainly you cannot say for the last administration. And you've got to be tough with them, because it's about gaining respect. It's about respect. It's not about, am I your buddy? Because they'll never be your friend. But how are you going to gain the respect of the Soviet Union and their leaders, or should I say the former Soviet Union of Russia? Because if you don't gain that, you'll never get anywhere with Putin or anybody in that area of the world. It's about respect, and you only gain respect by being number one in the world and leading, not following.
All right, where's Hank in D.C.? Hank, where are you? Stand up. Somebody point him out. Hank? All right, there's Hank. Hank wants to know, Michael, what is the biggest similarity and difference between your dad and Donald Trump? Biggest similarity, biggest difference.
Donald Trump was a billionaire, and my dad was a grade B actor. That's the greatest difference between them. Donald Trump called me Monday of the inaugural week. You know, what do you think, Donald Trump? He called me Monday of inaugural week. I had called him called Reagan to say, listen, congratulations to Donald Trump from the 40th first family to what's going to be the 45th first family. I mean, really think and put that in perspective for a moment, folks. Think when the United States of America had their first family back in the 1700s, 1800s. And since then, there's only now been 45 men who have been president of the United States. I'm from a very small group of people. And Donald Trump, no matter what I feel about him, if I agree or disagree on that, he now belongs to that family, if you will. And I called to say, congratulations. And he actually called me back. And the first thing he says to me, he says, you didn't support me during the primaries. I said, really? I said, no, I didn't. But I don't get behind anybody until you get the nomination, which I supported you then. He said, yes, I know. He said, I didn't know your father very well, but I liked him. And because I liked him, I like you too. I said, very good, Mr. President. Good to know that. I know you got another question. I'll let you answer, but I want to share this with you. It goes with the shooting March 30th, 1981, about the religious side of my dad. My dad was very religious. Used to take my sister and I to his mother's house on Sundays. We go to church and what have you. I was flying with my dad, Air Force One, Good Friday, 1988. Really nice. You can hitch a ride in Air Force One. I just spent the night at the White House.
I hear it's nice.
What's that?
I hear it's nice.
Yeah. Pretty good.
Food's good?
Food's pretty good.
Real knife and fork?
Yeah. You know what my son does? Cameron, he was 2.5 years old. And we're up there, up in the solarium, and the butler comes up, who, by the way, loved my father. And the butler comes up and says, Master Cameron, what would you like to have for dinner? You know what a 2.5-year-old orders?
What?
McDonald's hamburger, a vanilla shake, and an order of fries.
So you had to find an airport near a McDonald's.
I said, Cameron, it's the White House. and they went out and actually got a McDonald's hamburger, order of fries, and a vanilla shake, and brought it back to him. It was great. But we're landing at Point Mugu in California, Ventura. And my dad counts out on his fingers 9. And I said to him, I said, what is significant about the number 9? And he said, in 9 more months, I'll no longer be president of the United States. I said, are you looking forward to that? He said, yes, I am. I said, for what reason? He said, ever since I looked out the window of my limousine back on March 30th, 1981, and saw people laying in their own blood with bullets that were meant for me, I haven't, in fact, wanted to put other people in harm's way like what happened that day. And one of the places that could be going to church. So I haven't visited with my Lord and Savior on a regular basis because of that reason. And I'm looking forward to getting back and going to church each and every Sunday once I'm out of Oval Office. And, you know, saying when he got out of the Oval Office and was no longer president of the United States, he never missed church again. And when he couldn't go because of Alzheimer's disease, the pastor would come to my dad. My dad would always say, or not, the pastor would always say, I went to minister to President Reagan, but he ministered to me.